In the middle of a quiet street, beneath the slanting late-afternoon sunlight, the peaceful hum of the neighborhood cracked open like shattered glass when an elderly man, limping heavily on a worn black cane, screamed words that froze every moving thing around him. His voice trembled, but not from weakness. There was fire in it, raw and terrifying. He shouted that his wife had been beaten, his grief spilling into the air like an open wound. For a moment, even the leather-clad biker crew rolling down the street stopped, their engines rumbling low as they turned toward the trembling man. No one spoke, no one moved. It was as if the whole street was holding its breath, waiting to see what kind of storm would follow next. If you believe in kindness, loyalty, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. It truly helps us keep telling stories that matter. What no one knew then was that the old man, frail from age and burdened by pain, had reached the end of every limit a heart could endure. For years, he and his wife had been the quiet couple on the corner, the kind who watered their garden together, who waved to strangers, who slipped little handwritten blessings under neighbors' doors on holidays. But life is rarely gentle to the gentle, and ever since he had injured his spine decades ago, leaving him partially disabled, he had struggled with guilt that he could no longer protect the woman he loved more than his own breath. She was his strength, his anchor, his everything. And now she was lying bruised and sobbing inside their home, hurt by men who thought age made people weak and unworthy of respect. The biker standing closest to him was a giant, broad shoulders inked with wings and scars, his forehead creasing deeply as he listened. People expected him to shrug it off, to laugh or snarl or ride away without caring. After all, bikers like him didn't exactly walk around wrapped in softness, but something in the old man's trembling voice pierced right through every hardened layer he'd built over the years. Maybe it was the way the man's hand shook violently over the cane. Maybe it was the memory it stirred in him, of a mother he once failed to protect, a regret that never stopped eating at him. Whatever it was, it made him straighten slowly, lifting his head like a beast awakening to a purpose. The other riders behind him shifted, sensing the change, the sudden seriousness that replaced casual swagger. The biker crew wasn't the kind of group the neighborhood welcomed with open arms. People whispered when they passed. They crossed the street. They assumed trouble followed them like shadows. What they didn't know was that beneath the leather and noise were men who had been broken once, who had clawed their way back from dark places and learned the hard way what loyalty meant. They weren't saints, but they weren't heartless. And on that day, the pain of a stranger struck them like a personal insult. The old man's voice cracked again as he described what had happened. How two younger men had barged into his house demanding money he didn't owe. How they shoved him to the floor. How his wife, fragile as a sparrow, tried to shield him and suffered the blows instead. He blamed himself, admitting through clenched teeth that he was too weak to stop them. Tears pooled in the corners of his eyes, not from humiliation, but from the unbearable thought that the woman who spent years caring for him had to endure that terror alone. There was a stillness then, a silence thick enough to feel. The leader of the biker crew bent down slightly, not in mockery, but out of a strange, unexpected respect. And then, without a single word, he gestured sharply to his crew. The sound of engines roared alive again, but this time not with menace, this time with purpose, with a kind of righteousness that made the watching crowd step back. The bikers moved like a storm down the street, the old man pointing toward the direction the attackers had. Fled. Tires screeched, chains rattled, and windows trembled as the crew hunted down the cowards who believed no one would stand up for an elderly couple. It didn't take long. When the bikers returned, the attackers were no longer swaggering, they were shaking, their arrogance stripped away by the weight of facing real men who weren't afraid to defend the vulnerable. But the story didn't end with confrontation. What came after was what silenced the neighborhood even more. The bikers escorted the elderly man home, walking quietly into the small house where his wife sat on the sofa, clutching her bruised arms. She looked up with eyes full of fear until she saw her husband standing beside a group of imposing figures who somehow radiated safety instead of threat. The leader knelt down in front of her, gently holding out a cloth-wrapped cold pack, as if afraid he might break her with just his presence. The woman's lips trembled as she accepted it, staring at him with disbelief. No one had ever fought for her in such a dramatic, unexpected way. The crew stayed for hours. They fixed the shattered door. They cleaned the chaos. One of them cooked a pot of warm food in the tiny kitchen. Another quietly repaired the old man's broken cane. And when evening settled in, casting long, soft shadows across the living room. The bikers sat with the elderly couple as if they were family. It was a strange sight, massive tattooed men surrounding two fragile souls, speaking in soft voices, laughing gently, promising protection. It changed something in the air. It changed something in the neighborhood. People saw, really saw, what loyalty and kindness looked like when stripped of stereotype and judgment. When the bikers finally stood to leave, the old man's voice cracked once more, but this time from gratitude. He tried to thank them, but words were too small for what his heart felt. The biker leader placed a hand on his shoulder, heavy and warm, promising that no one would ever lay a hand on his wife again. And for the first time in a long time, the old man believed it. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps these meaningful stories reach more people. Special request: comment below, kindness still exists, to let me know you reached the end.